Welcome back to the Paranorm Girl podcast. I am your host, Kristen. Florence Kingsland wrote in 1904, "The realm of spirits was always thought to be nearer to that of mortals on Christmas than any other time." Once upon a not too distant past, a popular tradition caught hold in Victorian England. The tradition of cozying up around a blazing fire, surrounded by family and friends on Christmas Eve to share ghost stories. This tradition did not catch on in America quite like it did in England. 'Tis a shame. When the nights are this long, start so early, get this cold, and are so hushed when the snow falls outside the window. The setting has truly never been better. It's a tradition I intend to resurrect this year, and I urge you to join me. Now, if you would like to take part in giving the gift of fright and spreading some holiday fear, but alas, you have no stories of ghosts or monsters to share, then listen up. Today's guest may have a solution for you. His stories of the haunted, the demonic, and the dark have been stirring the imaginations and sending shivers up the spines of his audience since the pandemic. The tales he tells are sincerely frightening. But perhaps what makes them even more so, what keeps his listeners so enwrapped, what keeps them up at night, is the perfect scary story timbre and personal experiences with things that go bump in the dark. My guest is the creator and voice behind Mystery Archives. On this program, he covers terrifying stories of the supernatural. Many are real-life encounters. Many are previously untold. And many defy explanation to this day. For the sake of resurrecting tradition this Christmas Eve, be sure you make your way over to YouTube following today's show and subscribing to his channel. He is also the author of Stories from the Archives, Volumes 1, 2, and soon-to-be 3. In these books, he has included some of his scariest, most unsettling episodes and retold them for the reading audience. Please enjoy my conversation with Kody Richardson.
Ooh, that's an intense question. I'm just an average dude who got really lucky and put in a lot of work building a series on YouTube, and I get to do it now for a living. Thankfully, so far, knock on wood. But yeah, it's enabled me to have some really cool adventures and to dive into some really creepy cases. And other than that, I'm just a normal guy. I have a fiance, have a puppy who may or may not show up in the background. I play a little bit of video games. I work a ton on the series itself, and yeah, written a couple books now, which I'm thrilled to have out to the world. And other than that, I'm kind of boring. So,
Well, I don't know. I am a susser out of clues to, the origin story of folks, and I have to imagine, like, you've become the host of Mystery Archives.
Mhm,
It's incredibly popular. It's got nearly 300,000 subscribers now. You have written the series of books, very,
mhm.
very scary books. Like, a person who is this in depth with the paranormal, with the haunted, that's not born in a vacuum. And I was just curious, what was that instigating moment, that event that started the fascination that introduced you to this world?
That's fair. I didn't want to make it too long winded from the jump, I guess, because I'm thinking more or less in the modern day. But I do still get up to some pretty spooky adventures. But I had some paranormal experiences as a kid that kind of led me down this road of just my overall fascination with the paranormal.
Mhm.
And I've always kind of just had, even from like an entertainment standpoint, I've always enjoyed like darker shows, like Unsolved Mysteries and A Haunting and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, I had several different experiences, which I'm sure we'll dive into a little bit here, that just altered my perspective on things. And I grew up in a really rough and dysfunctional household, which I think was a little bit of a catalyst for some of that phenomenon. And just ever since those catalyzing years, I guess how you could put it, is just led me down this path. And it's kind of a long story. I know I'm not coming across super like clear. It's a little vague right now. Um, it's just there's a lot to divulge with that.
Mhm.
Like I came up with the idea for Mystery Archives in 2017, right? And didn't really do anything with it until 2020 when I had gotten laid off from my job. And I was like, I've grown up, I've had these experiences, I've always migrated towards these types of shows. I enjoy and I consume this type of entertainment, right? I was like, why don't I just try and take my fascination for things like the paranormal and the occult and
Mhm.
just try and do something like that in a documentary style in my own way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
ever since then, and now granted, I ended up going back to work and everything else until 2022 when I was lucky enough to leave to do this full time. But it was a lot of work getting there as far as
Mhm.
building up. Because I mean, I would work like 10, 12 hour shifts and then come home and like work on a story or edit for like another 2 to 3 hours at least per night. So it's like some pretty long days, you
Dude,
can
yeah.
imagine.
Mhm. Yeah, that's something
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of it, like, dawns on a lot of folks, is
Hmm.
just how much time, goes into just one single episode, a 30-minute episode. It's a lot of time to not just
Dude, it's a
edit
lot.
and record, but to research.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. Kudos, man.
Well,
Doing
thank
it with
you.
with a job too. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Well,
no, not so much these days. I'm very fortunate it is my job now,
yeah.
for now at least. But yeah, definitely up until a couple years ago, it was pretty intense.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Well, yeah, congratulations on this being it now, like, that
Appreciate
is a
that.
dream come true. Um, in the I don't wanna pull any information out of you that you don't
Mhm.
wanna talk about. I know you said it's long-winded, and that's no issue, but if there's anything you don't wanna divulge, that's fine. But I did have a question
Sure.
because you mention it a couple of times across your platforms,
Mhm.
and the books, that you did have personal experience with the occult, like you said. Was that is that something that you can talk about what that experience was?
Yeah, I can at least give a brief overview because
Okay.
I've had a few. Now I do have a video on my channel where I go really in depth in
Mhm.
all the details, and that was really cathartic to be able to get out to the world. But basically, I grew up. I'm trying to think of how to put this in perspective. In a nutshell, I grew up in two haunted homes. Um, the first home was first of all, I live in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, and it's kind of in the middle of like, I mean, it's kind of outside of a larger city. It's like a suburb of a larger city. Is the one of the towns I grew up in, and my parents were really dysfunctional during that time. There was a lot of like filth in the house. My mom was an animal and a material hoarder. I
Mm,
don't know if you're familiar with that kind of behavior.
yeah.
And I've always thought that that's contributed to kind of a breeding ground for these kinds of things. I actually have my dad interviewed in that video, and I offered to interview my mom and my siblings as far as like when I was just telling the overarching story, but he was the only one that wanted to be involved. And he thought that because he had a few experiences in the home as well, that there was something there that was agitating things. And basically, over the almost 2 years that we lived there, we went from a relatively normal family to complete dissolution. My parents got divorced. I had to move homes. But as far as the paranormal goes, the activity started off kind of minute. Like things would be moved.
Mhm.
Pardon me. Things would be moved around the house. The very first or second night that we ever stayed there when I stayed in my first room. And I apologize ahead of time. This is probably going to be a little scatterbrain because it's off the cuff.
You're fine.
But
Yeah. Yeah. Keep going.
but so I saw the apparition of a little boy that really wasn't much younger than I was at the time. Because when I lived there, I believe we were I was like 7 or 8. So I saw that. I obviously was freaked out. I didn't know what to make of it. Ran to my parents. Ended up sleeping in the living room for the next like 2 weeks until they eventually forced me to go back. And from there, like I said, it started off small. Things would be moved. Things started to get broken. Like we had a snow globe in my sister's room that, for no reason at all, just exploded one day. We thought that was weird, but we didn't really link anything together until
Right.
much later.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Basically, in the basement was where my mom kept a lot of like big wardrobe boxes just full of junk that she had accumulated. And I remember I tried to kind of take solace when my parents would fight. I kind of made my own little space down there where I would just kind of hang out and just get away from it all. And during one of their fights, I remember going down there and a large wardrobe box, like think like was ones you could put like dresses in, right?
Hmm.
Got thrown from one section of the basement all the way over to where I would be, essentially where my area was. And after that, I couldn't go down there by myself, like I was just way too scared.
Right.
And there were a few other things that happened. Like I said, it's a little scatterbrained off the cuff, but things just kept getting worse and worse. And we had many animals. I mentioned my mom also hoarded animals. And we had, I believe it was in total over the 2 years, like 8 animal deaths. That
Oh,
and it's not that my parents didn't take care of the animals. It wasn't neglect or anything like that. It's just they just like would be perfectly healthy and then they would just pass away like out of nowhere, which
my God.
obviously I've always found terrifying just in and of itself. Being a lover of animals, having a dog
Mhm.
and a turtle myself now. Um, so there was just something evil in that house. Um, when my parents got divorced, and obviously, if you want all the super gritty fine details, like I said, I have like an hour and a half long video where I go into all of it on my channel. But after my parents got divorced, when my dad was just living there, and before the whole custody stuff had been all sorted and what have you,
Mhm.
we us 3 kids, me, my sister, and brother. I'm the oldest of 3, by the way, just
Mhm.
to get that out there. We all were living with my dad, and it got to the point to where we were all having to sleep together in the living room because, especially at night, like essentially sundown, a lot of like stuff would happen during the day, just like small creepy things, like seeing stuff out of the corner of your eye or
Mhm.
things being moved or what have you, just bad feelings. But at night, things would, I mean, it would become really violent. We would either get pushed or hit, or things would get thrown, especially originating from that basement. I remember we would be huddled together in the living room, and more often than not, and I thought I was the only one that experienced this for a long time, was I would wake up around 2 or 3 in the morning and I obviously wouldn't be able to sleep because I would hear everything going on in the basement or the surrounding rooms or what have you. And I remember just being paralyzed with fear, and I would just have to hold out until daybreak, where it would usually cease pretty fast after the sun would come up, which I've always found is really bizarre as well.
Mhm.
But turns out later when I was putting the video together and just kind of diving back into my past, that speaking with my brother and sister, as well as my father and my mother, all separately, that especially my dad and my brother and sister at different times experienced pretty much the same thing, and
Mhm.
we just never talked about it, like as a group until recent. Pardon me, until recently.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, that's the witching hour, right? Is that
Yeah, which I found later on, obviously having delved into so many cases that it does seem to be kind of a trope, but I feel like it's
Mhm.
a trope for a reason.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like if something is something borders on, um, I mean, even if it was like an evil person in life, right? Let alone something demonic, you know, they're going to want to mock whatever, the antithesis of them is.
Mhm.
So 3 a.m. obviously being the supposed inversion of when Christ passed away, mocking the Trinity and that sort of a thing. If you subscribe to that belief system,
Mhm.
yeah, it's creepy. I've
Mhm.
experienced some 3 a.m. moments in a couple other cases I've been a part of, but yeah, just obviously back then as a child, I had no idea
Yeah.
how,
Yeah.
as far as the that whole concept is concerned.
Man, dude, that's that that is the pattern, like the way that you described it. The smallest of things start to happen, and the scatterbrain thing that you're talking about, it's because I'm assuming, because I have similar experience, that
Mhm.
so many of these little things start at the beginning, and the logical person is not going to automatically jump to, that's a demon in my house, that's an evil ghost in my house. It's like,
Right.
oh, okay, the snow globe, it maybe something hit it, or this thing just fell one time, and there's so much that
Right. Or
happens.
like some kind of pressure change or
Yeah,
something.
something, yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
like my mind
only.
tends to go to a more logical place.
Yeah, yeah.
I just think I tend to be scatterbrained when I'm talking about it because I think due to the dysfunction as well as the
Mhm,
trauma, I've blocked a lot of it out. So
mhm.
diving back in and trying to essentially put it in some type of cohesive order takes a little bit of time for me, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
It's
So
it's I
I was just like trying to spurt it all out at once, and
no,
I was like, I need to like slow down and take my time with it.
I really, really, appreciate you doing that. That was so
Yeah,
much more like, I mean, just it's heartbreaking to hear that, like, no little child should be that terrified and that harassed.
I agree.
Di
I agree.
did it ever come to some kind of resolution at that time, or did you guys just leave?
So, my parents ended up getting divorced, and my mother got custody of us, and we ended up moving to another much smaller town, which is about 45 minutes away from where we had lived at this time,
Mhm,
pretty much where I'd grown up until that point. So I was the new kid in town. I didn't know anybody. And on top of that, we moved in with my aunt who was recently married. And they lived in like a generational home that was my uncle's family's.
mhm,
So it was like 120 something year old semi renovated farmhouse. But they used to like raise livestock there and that sort of a thing. And they had other experiences prior to us moving there. But we experienced some really weird and some more aggressive manifestations there as time went on.
mhm.
Um, yeah, like, again, I go into it a lot more in the video itself, but, my grandmother who my mom's mom, she had lived with us for a time after my grandfather had passed away, and, she ended up actually passing away in the house, and I was with her for that. That's a whole other story to unpack,
Mhm,
but, the activity in the house really seemed to escalate after she passed away, because prior to that, it was a lot of really small things, like, trying to think of just, one thing in particular, like I had where the bathroom was pretty much you would walk in the front door, and to the right there was a staircase that went upstairs, and to the far left it was like a little wooden hallway essentially,
mhm.
and to the far left was my aunt and uncle's room. There was like a little office room, and then on the far right there was the bathroom, and it was the only working bathroom we had in the house. So I had gone up just nonchalant, going to use the restroom, not thinking anything of it. And I had seen a glowing blue figure of a man with like a white shirt and some kind of like jean overalls, just like run like almost inhumanly fast from the bedroom itself into the bathroom. And I remember I mean, this is kind of embarrassing to say now, but like I had to go use like like later on, I did make a few friends. Unfortunately, they lived nearby, but like I had to go use the restroom at my friend's house or my neighbor's house for like 2 or 3 weeks because I was too scared to go and,
Wow.
use my own restroom.
Mhm,
What makes it even creepier is, when I had told my mom about it, she kinda dismissed it at first, and, my aunt has always been like, her sister has always been a little more tuned into those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And she actually showed me it was ended up being a family photograph of they was during a family reunion of my uncle's side of the family. And I kid you not, there it was like I'd love to see if I could get the photo. I'm sort of I don't really talk to my uncle, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of an estranged type of situation, but if I could ever get the photo, I would love to show you guys. But there in the middle towards, like, the back row of people was the same guy that I saw, and
No.
yeah, and when I pointed it out and I was like, "I'm pretty sure that this is the man that I saw," and my aunt freaked out because I think it was 4 or 5 years before, she had technically lived there and before obviously we lived there as a family. It was my uncle's father, and he had died of brain cancer in the same bedroom where he had ran from towards the bathroom. So, yeah, that was creepy, to say the least.
Whoa. Cody, what
Yeah.
what? Oh my gosh, I think it's pretty clear why not that you just ended up hosting the show that you are, and writing the books that you did, but why there was just something I couldn't describe about the way that you tell the stories. Like, you're a great storyteller, but there was also something very intimate and very personal about listening to those stories coming from you. So I think, I mean, obviously that past would obviously have an effect
Yeah.
like that. Oh my
But,
gosh.
I mean, I appreciate it. Obviously, I just try to tell the stories the best way
Mhm.
that I know how and to, I guess, get the overall feeling across. And
Yeah.
pardon me here, I'm so sorry. I've had a cold for like 2 weeks, so
Oh,
I apologize.
that's
As I had to
okay.
clear stuff there.
That's okay.
Um, but yeah, it's and like I said, stuff after my grandma passed away just got way crazier than that.
Yeah.
Because prior to that, that was like the peak of it, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I don't live there anymore. I may as well give the town's name because it's still really small. But the town is called Sedgwick, Kansas. And I think when we lived there, it had about a population of like 1,500 people. I think maybe it's got like 2,000 now. It hasn't grown like a ton. But I think because having now where I am today, having visited a lot of different places, such as like Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the Mothman, a lot of Mothman activity took place,
Yeah.
having been to where the Silver Bridge collapsed and that sort of a thing, I really do think there are places in our world that perhaps the veil is a little bit thinner between this world and whatever comes next, whether it's
Right.
another dimension or what have you. And I think Cedric might be one of those places because it seems to have almost like a dreamlike state to just the experience of being there.
Mhm.
And it seems to attract some pretty strange stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, if you wanted to, I was going to get into one other story just about what happened following my grandma passing away.
Absolutely. Please.
Yeah, so and this also probably is about as crazy as it got, but following her passing away, uh and I go into this in the video as well, but so being in a small town, I mean, I don't know if you did this as a kid or not, but we used to do what was called ding dong door ditching, where you would run up and ring doorbells and run
I
away.
was a good little girl, so I didn't, but I knew of it. I knew.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. I was a pretty good kid too, but you know, we had fun.
Mhm.
But, our doorbell started to go off, usually, like, late evening, which makes perfect sense, and we just thought that it was some kids messing with us or something. But it got kind of excessive because it kept happening, like, night after night for weeks. And what's crazy is when the doorbell would ring, we would someone would rush and open the door, and we wouldn't be able to see anybody, and our yard was pretty open. Like, it didn't have a lot of, like, hiding spots and stuff like that, obviously having done it myself, I'm just trying to logically think if it was some kids, where would they have gone, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Well, we never found anybody, and my uncle worked really early in the morning, so he would usually be in bed when the doorbell would start, sporadically going off. So he got pissed off one night
Mhm.
and he just disconnected it entirely, like took away the power source, took it off. he was like, I'm done with that. You know what I mean? Like if they're going to knock on the door, whatever, they're going to knock on the door, but it is what it is. So we did that, and it was good for like 3 or 4 days, from what I can recall. And then the doorbell started going off again. And all that was left there was like two wires. It's like you would have to literally try and, like, you know what I mean? Like rub the wires together to get any sort of a
Right.
notification of a doorbell thing to go off. So that was bizarre. And that kept happening. And we
Mhm.
obviously had no explanation for it. My mom was just like, oh, like we'll just ignore it. Like it doesn't exist. Cause that was just her way of coping with stuff, I
Yeah.
think. And there was one night, because I mean, a lot of times, me being the oldest of us three kids, my mom would have to run errands usually, in the evening or whatever, like run to the grocery store, pick up, I don't know, prescriptions, stuff like that. And I remember this one time she was out. My aunt, who was going to school to be like something to do with her teaching degree at that time, so she was at night school, and my uncle was working at 12, so he had decided to stay late, and he used to give certifications for pilots. So like he was very much Wichita in the general area is very much known for like aircraft production
Mhm.
here in Kansas. And anyways, that's what he was doing. So it was us kids there alone. And usually, me being the oldest, it would be my job to make sure that like my brother and sister had food, that like we took showers and brushed our teeth and that sort of a thing. Well, our bathtub, which we used to just take baths upstairs in the same bathroom that I was talking about, and the bathtub broke. And so the only other option we had was this old shower that was down in the basement. And the basement was already pretty creepy because, similar to my mom, and obviously with my mom being there, my aunt also hoarded stuff. So that like the whole basement is pretty much full of just junk, kind of similar to how our first house was, but with it being a 120 plus year old house to begin with, it was already extra creepy.
Yeah.
So we would join one another down there, and one of us would stand outside of the door when the other took the shower, and it was just like an old spigot style shower head, just in like this concrete enclosure, essentially, where you could look up and see just the rafters, you know what I mean, of the basement, which was already creepy enough to begin with. And so we would usually just we had this old like 90s style or early 2000s style boombox, and we would just put on like the radio or whatever was available. And we would just be down there just trying to keep each other company, while we did our business, so we could just
Mhm.
get in and out and not be too freaked out. Well, there was one night, mom was out. My little brother was he was upstairs, just I don't know, he's watching TV or something. And I was standing watch outside of the door while my sister showered, and the power went out, which was strange because there wasn't any sort of a storm or anything like that. So I'm already like, I'm unnerved, but I'm like, you're not thinking necessarily that it's something paranormal or even in that same vein.
Yeah.
Well, my sister's freaking out, obviously, and I'm like, just chill out, just finish like rinsing off. You'll be good. I'm right here. I could help guide her to the stairs or whatever if I needed to. And we started hearing this God, I don't know how to describe it. It was more or less like some kind of a snarling noise coming from inside of, so where the shower was, right? Let me see if I can coordinate it here. There was just a concrete wall, and then on the other side of that over here was the actual like basement living room area. And so we were like in a laundry room basically, where the shower was. And we started hearing this snarling noise that, I mean, it's it was inhuman. It was terrifying. And my sister, obviously, I'm freaking out at that point. My sister's
Mhm.
freaking out. She still has soap all over her. She rushes and runs into me at the stairs because it's pitch black down there. We can't see anything. We're still hearing this noise. We don't know what's going on. She's scratching me,
Yeah.
trying to get past me to run up the
Yeah,
stairs.
right.
So I'm trying to help her get up the stairs. I'm trying to get up the stairs. My little brother's screaming upstairs. We managed to get upstairs back into the living room, and the lights were flickering. We're still hearing this sound come from the basement. So I just took my sister, who was wrapped in a towel. I took my brother, and we just ran out into our backyard, and we just waited there for my mom to get home. and it ceased at some point. I wasn't really keeping track as far as, we
Mhm.
could see lights flickering and that sort of a thing. But
Oh my god.
so that was probably the peak of how scary it got there, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was pretty terrifying. And what makes things even freakier is that wall essentially is mostly solid concrete. So there's no way any sort of an animal would have gotten inside of the wall or anything like that.
Mhm.
And I haven't heard anything even similar, since then, uh, that I could even compare it to as far as what it sounded like. But it is bizarre that these things picked up after my grandma died in the house. But my grandma loved us all, and she was a very, like, spiritual lady, loved us kids, no malice whatsoever.
Sure.
And, it's strange because I don't think it was her in any
Mhm.
sense, but maybe something, like, perhaps with how traumatic the passing was with me being there with her, because it was
Mhm.
me, my mom, and my aunt that were actually with her when she passed. I actually wasn't even supposed to be home that day. I was homesick. It was January 25th of 2005, and I remember that because a movie came out on DVD. I was homesick. We went to pick up my prescription. I was like, "Ooh, mom, can you buy me this movie?" So I had been watching that movie when things started to happen. And
Mhm.
yeah, there's a lot more details and stuff to unpack with that. But I think perhaps as a result of that, maybe it attracted something that maybe wasn't there to begin with. It's
Yeah.
hard, but it's hard telling.
It's not out of the question too, to think just because of other similar kind of occurrences that I'm aware of,
Mhm.
that if there was an energy already there, that it could potentially feed off of that mourning. It's when you're so vulnerable, like
Right,
emotionally speaking, and just wiggle its way right into that and right into people's lives at that lowest of moments or traumatic moments.
right.
Yeah, because that I wouldn't think, like, if your grandmother was a very loving and, kind person, she loved you so much, like,
Mhm.
it's pretty clear, like, the behavior does not match the person,
Oh, right. Yeah, no, I didn't
so
for a second think that it
yeah,
had
yeah.
anything to actually do with her as a
Mhm,
person. It's just it
mhm.
is bizarre that things got so crazy, especially following
Yeah.
her passing.
Yeah. Well, all right. So a couple of thoughts before I lose them. Number one, would
Sure.
you mind? Can we reconnect after we are done here, and I can get that episode link from you, the one where
Yeah,
you go into full detail? I would really really like to listen to that one.
for sure.
Two. This is creeping me out, but in your stories, you have described so many things that we have in common, like
Mhm.
down to the basement shower and the head and the rafters and the weird cement wall, and, like, it's freaking me out because, like, I can
I
s
actually didn't know that. That's wild.
that is ugh. And I also grew up in 2 haunted homes.
Well
Uh,
then.
yes, this was meant to
Can
be, you were
relate,
meant to
dude.
say it,
Can
dude.
relate.
Now, the other thing was, so when you're going through these stories on
Mhm.
Mystery Archives, you must be seeing the pattern, the similarities to
Mhm.
your own experiences. Has going through the show, has that helped you at all to look back on your own experiences and to try to conceptualize what was happening? Or do you just see the similarities and think, "Well, yeah, it's something."
No, that's a great question. I think as a result of diving into a lot of different cases, obviously I've always been aware of the stuff that I went through, me and my family went through, but I didn't think of trying to put it in any sort of a chronological order to actually get it out to the world and try and tell people. Because those that are really close to me, they've known about it for years. It's
Mhm,
just not something I ever thought that I would share with the world.
mhm,
Um, I originally told, the stories or rough versions of them, I further added more details as I remembered when I really decided to get it more or less out there professionally,
mhm,
um, where I had is this was like when I had first started, so, like, I don't know, 2021 or so, where I had just kinda put some of the details out there on the channel, and, long story short, I actually had a network reach out to me and they were doing a new show. I'm not going to name the show or anything, 'cause it
Mhm.
ended up not working out, which that's a funny story too. But they were interested in telling my story and recreating it and that sort of a thing. And I was like, well, I'm not necessarily getting it out there for the sake of making money. I'm
Sure.
trying to get it out there for the sake of it being cathartic. And if there's anyone who went through similar stuff, maybe they can relate and maybe feel like if they share their story, whether it's with me or whoever, that it'll kind
Mhm.
of help them heal from whatever they went through in the past. And that is more or less why I decided to put it out kind of as like a tell all type of thing.
Okay.
In
Okay.
my second book as well, I essentially rehash all of the details and added as many as I possibly could, because I do include my own stories in the second book as well.
Oh, wow. Wow. And
Yeah.
you've got a 3rd volume coming out, early next year, right?
Yeah, so it should be out, I believe, in March. I gave myself a little bit more breathing room just because this year has been absolutely insane.
I
I mean,
bet. Yeah.
I've written 2 books. I've had to produce this show. I've done a lot of like investigations and stuff that people don't
Mhm.
even know about yet. I've had 2 I filmed 1, and I'm working on 2 other documentary projects as well. So it's just been a lot. It's been a lot.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
well, maybe that's, would you be able to share that with me for Patreon, like one of your investigations,
Yeah.
any details? Would that be cool? Because
Yeah,
I was
sure.
gonna ask you about that, but, I think let's since we're talking about the books, maybe we
Sure.
can kinda gear in that, and then I've got a few more questions for you before we close out.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so like I told you, before, I was able to pick up the 1st volume. It was I told you this, and I don't know how else to say it, but it scared the crap out of me. It scared me. And I
There's some
don't
scary
often.
cases, man.
There are. And it was so cool because, like, I got to learn brand new details about cases that are known to me. In that 1st volume, you include 10 cases.
Yep.
I also got to learn about just cases new to me entirely, just all of this stuff. And I hope this is taken as the compliment that it is, but as I was going through it and feeling those feelings and being scared and just I don't know, enwrapped in the information, like, you are like the adult version of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Do you
You
remember
know,
that series?
I do actually. I think I read the books as a kid, or book. I can't remember if it was the
I
series of
think
stories
it was
or
like 3 or 4 books total, but yeah,
I
yeah,
definitely
different.
read at least one of them. But yeah, I've gotten that before. So no, compliment taken. I appreciate that.
Good, good. That's how it's meant, man. But I was gonna ask, like, how are there plans to continue the series after this 3rd one? Like, are those in the works?
I would certainly be interested. I haven't necessarily had that talk with my publisher yet, but
Mhm.
because as far as I know, we were set up for 2. I signed on for the 3rd, and I would love to do more for sure. I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
it, makes for a pretty interesting read.
I
So
agree. I
as long as
agree.
they're on the same page, no pun intended, yeah, I would love to.
Um, well, how let's see. So what's the feedback been like so far? I know number 2 was just released, but how are people receiving that 1st one?
The first one, I mean, as far as I could tell, it's done exceptionally well. Obviously, I don't have like sales numbers and that sort
Oh,
of
no worries.
stuff yet,
I was just
but
curious, yeah.
just from people who have ordered it and reviewed it and shared feedback with me, whether it was through the channel or through
Mhm.
DMing or whatever on Instagram or Facebook. They've been really happy with it.
Yeah,
They think
yeah.
that the stories are terrifying and worth the time. And I'm just really glad that people are enjoying um, my research and my work. It's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, I will be linking direct links to buy, so I hope that anyone listening to this episode today, do please check this out. Like, it's good. It's just good. It's a good story and book, and then go check out the show as well. Of course, if you have not yet heard of it, which I'd be surprised if you haven't. Um,
I really appreciate that again. No pressure, but I will take any traffic I can get, and just know I appreciate everyone who takes the time.
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. I hope they do. Um, so another thing, let's see. Oh, so I just wanted to mention real quick before we move
Mhm.
on.
Sure.
One of the stories in there, like I will say my personal favorite was Bobby Mackey's.
Bobby
I
Mackey's.
guess I didn't know that story. I
Really?
guess I just never heard the full story about everything that happened. And then
It's definitely an interesting one.
Bobby was still skeptical by the end of it all. I'm like,
Yeah, you're like, "Bro, how?" See, that to me is like, I don't know, this is not to disparage Bobby Mackey or anything like that, but it's kinda, I don't know, denial is really powerful, and
yeah.
I think maybe he just might be a little bit in denial, just my
Yeah,
guess.
and yeah, I mean, I guess maybe the stakes were high, at the time, like, he had a young family
Oh,
or
yeah.
a kid about to be born and a wife
Mhm.
and all of that, so, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
there's
sure
definitely a
pressure was
lot
on.
riding on his shoulders for sure. So
Mhm.
I can kind of understand, and I would argue these days it's a little more socially acceptable um to talk about, the paranormal, and I mean,
Mhm.
we could even get into like paranormal tourism and that sort of a thing, how that's
Yep,
evolved.
yep.
But I don't think it was quite the same way back then.
No, no, far less acceptable for sure.
Mhm.
Is that a location that you've been to? Or
No, no, unfortunately not. I would have loved to. I've been over by Wilder, Kentucky several times, but the original location now, as far as I know, has been closed down due to structural issues. So
Oh.
they've relocated the actual Bobby Mackey's to a different location. I'm not
Oh.
sure if it's reopened or not yet, but the original where everything took place with Carl Lawson and that whole situation, I believe
Mhm.
is closed now, because I mean the building was essentially falling apart.
Oh, that's so sad though. Yeah,
Yeah.
so they're gonna are they gonna tear it down or fix it?
Yeah, no, as far as I know, they're probably gonna demolish it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, I wish they could preserve it, make it like a national or a historical monument, something like that, yeah.
A lot of states are like that, even if things go into, disrepair, if they are historical buildings, they won't allow
Mhm.
people to tear them down, which is cool in some respects,
Yeah,
especially if it had to do with something like this, but I think it was more or less like a public hazard, and if they
sure.
had investigators and stuff too because of the structural integrity and that sort of a thing, there
Mhm.
was fear that they could get hurt, what have you, so,
Yeah, totally get it.
yeah.
I would have loved to have made it
It's
there, I
still
do
lame.
think
I would have signed a
yeah.
waiver. I would have signed a
Yeah,
waiver for sure.
totally. Yeah, no liability on you if I fall through the floor, like, that's all me.
Exactly, exactly.
All right. So we're going to right up to the end here. This has gone by so quickly. Dang. There
Oh,
were
yeah, that's crazy. It's already been pretty much an
I
hour.
know. But there were just a couple of things I definitely wanted to touch on with you before we reach the end because well, one is about the demonic
Okay,
and the concept about it. Because the demonic does play a pretty big part on your show and in the book. Um
definitely.
comes up quite a bit. How you yourself, you just lay out the facts and you let the listener or the reader just decide for themselves.
Right.
But what are your actual, like, personal opinions, beliefs about the demonic?
Ooh, I would say that that's probably changed quite a bit over the years,
Mhm.
because I'm not I was raised Catholic, up until my grandma passed away. That's actually when we pretty much stopped going to church, but we were never super involved, if that makes sense, just
Mhm.
far less having the beliefs, having read the Bible and that sort of a thing. I I don't know if I necessarily fully believe or think they fully have the story correct as far as, the whole Lucifer's fall and, the rebellious angels and that sort of a thing. I tend to lean more towards negative entities,
Okay.
whether it's in another dimension or what have you, that for some reason or another are influencing and perhaps feeding off of people, their fears and that sort of a thing. There's a lot of different theories, but like I do consider myself a theist. Like, like I do think there is a God. I just don't necessarily think anyone or everyone has it figured out. I certainly don't.
Yeah.
Um, but having encountered some pretty scary stuff in person, both in my youth and as an adult now, uh, I do think that there are human spirits. And, if you were, for lack of a better word, a dickhead in life, then you're going to probably be a dickhead in death.
Mhm.
And, I'm sure if someone who was a super negative person when they were alive, when they die, they would try to inflict as much misery on those that they could,
Yeah.
drag with them essentially. So I think that definitely plays a role. But as far as the real, what would we consider truly demonic cases, I think those are very, very exceptionally rare to encounter. Pardon me, to encounter. But I do think they exist. I just don't think every single instance of a violent haunting or that sort
Mhm.
of a thing is necessarily demonic. But
Okay.
people also are incredibly fascinated with it as a concept. So not only from a research standpoint, but from an entertainer standpoint,
Right.
I want to give people what they want to consume, what they're most interested in. And
Right.
I love learning about it as well. So I
Yeah.
hope that kind of makes sense. Like,
Yeah,
yes, I do
yeah.
believe in it, but I think it's super rare. Just my
Okay. Okay.
personal take.
Yeah, I think we align, for the most part on that belief. Like, I absolutely agree with you. If you were an asshole in life, you're gonna be an
Yeah,
asshole in death. Nothing just
probably.
magically changes about your personality, just by dying.
Yeah,
Yeah, 'cause I actually covered demons and talked about Satan and the whole story on this show. Like, I go subject by subject, season by season. So I had a whole season dedicated to demons and possession and all of that. And I kind of landed somewhere in there that the demonic, or what most people consider to be the demonic, I think it's a misperception on our part. It's a misunderstanding of what it is we're actually
dealing
dealing with.
with. Right.
Yeah, 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 I think it's another entity entirely, or, like a just an asshole ghost, just to the nth degree.
Right.
But yeah, it's fascinating to me, and I do think, like from an entertainment perspective, that lends itself to an educational perspective. Like, if
Mhm,
you have to call something demonic, to get somebody's attention, to just pay attention to the case, to the story,
mhm.
and learn about that and what that process looks like,
Right.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, do it. Like, if that gets somebody involved, I think it's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, it's almost necessary in a
Mhm.
lot of ways, especially when you're diving into, like, really intricate cases to try and grab people's attention, and for
Sure.
one reason or another, that's a good way to do it.
Mhm.
But I would say, the videos will speak for themselves as far as the details and the cases go, but I do ultimately try to leave it up to people to
Yeah.
decide for themselves. I can give my 2 cents or what have you, but at the end of the day, it's gonna be up to you to decide what you wanna believe.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah, no, demons and the concept of hell and all of that is just incredibly fascinating to me anyways, take away, let alone what I get to do for a living and learn about these cases and entities and those sort of a things. So I'll
Mhm.
definitely be diving into those episodes for sure that you have. So because
Boy,
I love listening to a good podcast, man, and just getting my chores done or errands done or whatever. So
oh,
yeah,
well, that
I'll
was
have to share you around with my audience as
that
well.
that was
So,
early on in the show. I cannot promise it is listen worthy, but you know what? Dang
hey
it, I
man,
did it. I got through it. But it is such a fascinating story, the whole concept about demonic, about Lucifer, that, and then to be able to look at the actual history and the
yeah,
evolution of those terms. Where did those actually come from?
mhm.
To see that was really, really eye-opening. Uh,
It's funny. I actually recently, in the last couple months, started basically what I would consider like a mini series that I call the Demonology Archives, where I've started to
ooh,
dive into those,
okay.
like different entities and where they actually originate from, where the references come from, and that sort of a thing. I've done.
Mhm.
I did the Zozo demon,
Yeah,
which,
yeah, I listened to that
and
one.
the loose correlations with, Pazuzu from
Mhm.
Mesopotamian belief and that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
I think I've done I've done Leviathan, and I just did Lilith a little while ago. I'm kind of spacing them out because obviously there's only going to be so many that people will
Mhm.
really care to learn about, that
Mhm.
I want to learn about as well. But they're just not as popular as like my normal uploads. But
Yeah.
I enjoy doing them because I enjoy learning about that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Same, same. I think it's yeah, the Zozo episode was very, very good. You actually got to talk to Darren Evans, right?
So I didn't actually speak to Darren Evans himself.
Okay.
I did speak to a friend of his who went by the pseudonym Butch,
Oh,
and
okay,
he we
okay.
talked because I had like an actual full episode on the Zozo Demon that kind of got me to where I am today as far as growth is concerned. It's one of those videos that just went kind of viral. It was just relevant for the time apparently, but he actually reached out after the fact, and I just kind of touched base with him after he kind of proved who he was, and got some details on it. And yeah, apparently, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth here, but apparently, Darren and his relatives, they won't even say anything resembling the name because it terrifies them so much to this day. But they're in a much better place now
Hmm.
as
Oh,
far as
okay.
like they're safe. Everyone seems to be doing good and what have you. So
Okay. Okay,
at least there's that.
good. I'm glad to hear that. I know it was a pretty traumatic experience, just from what I heard on your episode. Um,
Definitely.
I'll tell you more about it after we're done here, but Darren Evans is not necessarily a fan of mine because I
Really?
I made a video once,
Okay.
questioning Zozo because I was going through the history, and all I
Right.
did was just question it, and, yeah, he had some choice words for me. But
That's
that was
okay.
years ago, so hopefully he's forgotten all
I
about
I
me.
I can't name names on the air, but I had a really large YouTuber and someone who has a show on the Discovery Channel, and it's not who you're thinking it is. It's not Zach Bagans, it's someone else who tried to sue me. I shit you not, who tried to sue me back in July.
What?
I got the takedown notices for the video that I had on the subject on the
Mhm.
4th of July. So I'm like, what the fuck is this about? And long story short, they tried to sue me over 3 images of this home that they had supposedly took that I forgot to cite because it was an older video. I didn't even
Oh.
necessarily know what I
Mm.
was doing at the time. But yeah, they were trying to sue me and destroy my channel over that. So there's a lot of shitty people
Sure.
in any industry, let alone entertainment, let alone by larger extension the paranormal community or
Yeah.
what have
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So it's a sad thing. I've been very fortunate. I have one other story I'll probably tell you off air of someone else that I've dealt with that had some choice words for me, but it regards another case that I've covered. But I always try to anything that's publicly available, I
Mhm.
try to include. I try to dig through everything with a fine-tooth comb. And I'm human. I make
Mhm.
mistakes sometimes or I misquote sometimes or what have you, but I do my absolute best to not to, to not. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
some people are just something else, man.
They get very, very territorial over what they consider their content and their information and, their world. Like, I get it, but, like, I'm like you too. I try to cite everything, just go above and beyond to cite everything, give credit where credit is due.
Right.
Um But that makes sense for your show, like how it exploded, like, now more eyeballs
Mhm.
are gonna be on it, and people see the value in that, so, yeah, they're gonna be like,
Yeah.
"Okay, yeah, you used my picture without asking
Well
me, I'm gonna."
well,
Yeah.
so this person, and again, I don't know exactly how all true this is because I ended up settling, so I didn't have to go through the legal
Mm,
rigmarole and that sort of a
mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
Was and it really showed me how just broken and how easily someone can abuse the copyright system because it would have been transformative works, fair use, anyways. But
Yeah.
whatever, let bygones be bygones.
Sure.
But
Yeah, yeah.
this person apparently bought the house, and I wasn't aware of that, so of course I didn't put that in the video itself. And
Mhm.
they were what it really came down to is they were upset that my video was the top ranking video on their what they considered their like life's work, and
Oh.
they had made a whole series which obviously was of a lesser quality, and I made one video and I dwarfed them as far as viewership is concerned, which obviously I didn't do maliciously.
Yeah, yeah.
So they
Mhm.
decided to go out of their way and be a dick about it, but it is what it is. I
Mm,
wouldn't do it. I've only taken down one video for copyright and it
Mhm.
was someone who just blatantly uploaded it and said that they made it, and that's the only time I've ever taken anybody down. I've probably had 50 plus re-uploads, but as long as they cite me as the original author, I don't care,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Boy, yeah, that's pretty blatant. The courage,
Yeah.
the gall.
Yeah, yeah,
It's kinda
yeah.
crazy.
As long as they say, like, "This was originally done by Mystery Archives," then
at
cool, bro,
least do
whatever.
that, yeah.
I could have 100% copyright match, but if you're gonna say that you made it from scratch, nah, brother. That's not gonna
Oh,
fly.
no, that's some pretty dirty work there.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, but the like the good part about that is those kinds of folks, they or I guess it's not good, but it is what it is. Those kinds of folks don't ordinarily, get the accolades and the credit at the end of it. Like if you can't make your own stuff, like
Yeah,
you can only take
right.
from others, like at the end, you don't really get
People
there.
will
It's
do people will scheme and do anything they can
for
sometimes
the
to try
shortcut,
and
yeah.
yeah, for the
Yeah.
shortcut, but
Mhm.
I hate to break it to them, there is no shortcut. This stuff
There's not.
takes I mean, as far as, like, just from, like, a growth standpoint, this stuff takes
Mhm.
years, man.
Well, yeah, you had started this show in you said 2017 or 2016?
Yeah, so I had the original concept and I actually founded the channel with the name and everything in
Mhm.
2017, and then I had thought about it and kinda conceptualized between then and 2020, and then I got laid off and I was like, "Well, I need something to focus on," because
Mhm.
everything else that was going on in the world at that time as well. But yeah, I just ended up just diving in and just starting it then.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so, I mean, it takes time. Sometimes we sit on things, sometimes, we have to try different things. It's a whole experimental lab over here. I can just speak from personal experience, just
Oh,
always
absolutely, and it's
trying
ever
different
changing,
things.
that's the crappy part
Mhm.
too.
Yeah.
It's ever changing.
Yeah. Well, just one more thing. Oh my gosh, we're almost to time.
It's
One
all
more
good.
thing about the show and about the book.
Mhm,
The Warrens. When you are speaking of the demonic, the
mhm.
Warrens do make an appearance. They were a huge part of that. What what are your thoughts on the Warrens? What's your opinion about their credibility, their influence, or their motives?
So I actually get this quite a bit, and I have some interesting stuff that I'm going to share as well
Okay.
regarding just regarding something I'm doing that involves a member of the Warrens
Okay.
family. But not that I'm like super close or anything like that. But uh, I think that the Warrens, any way that you slice it, were pioneers in a sense. I don't
Mhm.
think a lot of people would be able to make any sort of a living off of the paranormal if it wasn't for the Warrens. I do think a lot of the cases they dealt with, especially early on, perhaps were maybe the real deal. I do think that for publicity and probably money, they were later on exaggerated. Not necessarily those specific cases, but the earlier ones, but maybe some ones that they dealt with later on
Right.
maybe got exaggerated, and whether that was their fault or the media's or what have you, it's hard telling. But actually, it's funny because I'm gonna speak with now that we don't have like an exact date, but the tentative date essentially is the second week of December. But I'm gonna be speaking with Chris McKinnell. Doing an interview with him, and he's actually the grandson of the Warrens. And,
Oh,
I've got a lot of questions for him
yeah.
that I'm sure most people would like to hear because it's not every day you get the opportunity to be able to speak to someone like that.
Mhm.
And, it's funny because I joined a Warren's group just to further learn about him at some point, and I saw someone posting, like, intimate, like, family photos, including them, and I was like, "That's I feel like you can't just go source those from somewhere," you know? And turns out one thing led to another. I ended up messaging him, and yeah,
Oh.
he's their grandson. He's got, I mean, I can't wait to pick his brain about it. So
Yeah. Oh, what a cool opportunity.
yeah, what's your take? Because I know everyone's got an opinion, and hey, no shame if you feel differently.
I do agree with you on, like, they're pioneers. They are
Mhm.
pioneers, that is not up for debate.
Mhm,
Their influence, like I go back and forth on whether or not their influence was a good thing or a bad thing,
mm,
because that was directly preceding like the big satanic panic, and then I do
mhm.
think there was capitalization during that time.
Oh, absolutely.
I think they did ultimately do more good than harm.
Mm,
But when you're tippy-toeing and dealing through with things like the demonic, like just my experience with the concept of possession,
mhm,
child possession, things that people do with animals, like when they go to the extremes in
mhm,
regards to the demonic, I just cannot get behind that. And I just know that an influence like Lorraine's and Ed's, as well placed as it may have been, that
mhm.
does affect those extremists that are going to go to that extreme. And that's just an area I say, nope, I'm not, that cannot exist, that cannot continue. I do not agree with that, and that's just, yeah, it has no place in this world. So it's only like through association of their influence that it can turn
Right.
very bad. Otherwise, yeah, I do think they did more good than harm ultimately, but
That's fair.
definitely influential, definitely pioneers, and paved the way for everyone that came after.
Right.
I
And the
will.
way that I look at it too is like, sorry, I didn't
Oh,
mean to
no,
cut
no,
you
no, you're
off
good.
there.
You're good.
I do respect them in many ways.
Hmm.
And obviously I didn't know them. I wasn't there to, say that I have personal firsthand experiences with whatever cases and what
Yeah,
have you.
yeah.
So I think it's fair with figures, as big of figures as they became, that everyone can kind of feel some type of way about it,
Hmm.
or about them.
Sure. Yeah. They did shine a light on an area that may have otherwise remained un undiscovered, studied,
Right.
like I can
Or at
you can
least
look
for
at.
the time, they were at least ahead of the curve for sure. I'm sure somebody at
Absolutely,
some
yeah.
point would have hopped on the train, but
Zach Bagans would have gone back in a time machine to begin begin that, his pioneering ways. He's a great businessman, I will say
he's
that.
a fantastic businessman. I don't necessarily, I've heard a lot of stuff about Zach over the years. I've never dealt
Mhm.
with him. I obviously don't know him, that, just to get that out of the way. But I think, if it wasn't for the other members of what became Ghost Adventures, I don't think Zach would have been shit as far as the paranormal is concerned.
Oh, interesting, interesting point, yeah.
Well, he was a DJ
Oh.
before he ended up meeting the other guys. And their very first documentary that they put together, which I believe you can still find on YouTube, is, I don't recall the name off the top of my head, but me and a friend of mine watched it about 4 or 5 months ago, and it's actually really, really interesting. I do
Oh.
think they capture some pretty legitimate stuff. So I think the intention started out legitimate, um, but what it's morphed into now is a bit of a caricature. Um,
Mhm.
as far as like the show itself and the evidence is concerned and that sort of a thing. Again, just my opinion. I haven't seen, now I'm very familiar with the Latoya Amons case. I haven't
Mhm.
personally seen the Demon House documentary by
It was
Zach.
it was good,
Uh,
actually, yeah.
yeah, my fiance's seen it. She said it was really good. I meant to
Mhm.
watch it at some point. I just haven't gotten around to it. But yeah, Latoya Amons actually, I don't know if, are you pretty familiar with that case?
Yeah, somewhat, somewhat.
Ish, yeah.
Mhm.
I've done a few deep dives on it. Well, I did like a full deep dive episode, and then when they put out the movie The Deliverance, I kind of revisited it just to see, you know, what maybe they got right versus maybe what they didn't, sort of a thing. As far as from what I could tell. But um uh having a very close friend that I'm working on a podcast with, he's spoken with Latoya a few different times, and she genuinely believes what she went through, and she gave no indications, as far as like that she was making it up or anything like that. So it's
Mhm.
that's a very interesting case for sure. But I do think it's interesting that he purchased the property to then investigate it, have this all this scary shit happen on this documentary, have the demon
Mhm.
supposedly affect his eyesight, and then to tear it down because it's quote too dangerous. And then now he has this haunted museum where he leases all the items from other people, and
Yeah.
claims that, that they're his own essentially to profit off of it. But I read somewhere he makes like just off the museum like 20 grand a day. So
Wow. Well,
he's doing pretty good. And like,
not
look, I love
surprising.
me
Yeah.
some good business, brother. Then he's doing pretty good. But
Yeah.
at what point do you I don't know. I just think you could have your cake and eat it too. I think you could conduct proper investigations and not bullshit
Mhm.
things and still do all right. You know what I mean? I don't
Mhm.
know. I just, in some ways, a lot of people could say that, maybe he's sold out in some sense. And there's a lot of, you guys can do your own research and again, make your own conclusions about Zach Bagans. But I've heard conflicting things that he's kind of an asshole and that he's kind of I don't know, a
Certainly.
charlatan.
Yeah.
But do I know him? I don't.
Yeah, I will say, like, I won't comment on, whether or not, like, most of what he does is fact or faked, but, like,
Right, because it's
especially
all
early
speculative.
on it is, absolutely, but I will say early on, like, I have an acting background, 25 years I was an actor, so I feel like
No kidding.
I've
That's
got a
sick.
good thank you. I tried. I failed, but I tried.
Hey,
But
man, most people don't even try. So,
but I feel like I've got a pretty good read on folks,
mhm,
and just watching those early episodes with the Ghost Adventures crew and hearing the stories from Zach that he would tell about his experience and just kinda watching him go through it, like, I don't think he's a good actor.
mhm.
I think it's pretty apparent when he is putting on the show, but
Yeah,
there
for
there
sure.
there is a sincerity, about him sometimes that I pick up on, so there is some truth to all of the cacophony that is
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Ghost
yeah.
Adventures
I'm
now,
not
like, I sense that.
yeah, like, I'm not just trying to 100% just shit on him as a
Oh, no, no,
person or
no,
his
no, I wasn't
experiences
I
because
would
I would never try to just invalidate someone's
mm,
experiences. I just think from where it started versus kinda what it is now and some of the shadier stuff that's happened in the
mhm,
background that, it maybe started out with good intentions, but perhaps ended up maybe a little worse off than it was
absolutely.
supposed to.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, 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 I was just throwing my opinion out there. I had nothing.
No, you're good.
I love
You're
what you
good.
had to say about it. I love what you had to say about it. Well, Cody, so let's wrap this up so that we can jump backstage
Alright.
and have our awesome chat about your investigations.
Alright.
First off, do you have any upcoming events or appearances or things in the works that you would like to share?
Ooh, I don't. I wish I
That's
did,
okay.
but I don't. I've traveled a ton this year, but unfortunately no expos and stuff or anything
Okay.
like that. As far as I'm aware so far, maybe there'll be some more stuff next year. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. 2025 is it's just around the corner, man. Brand new year.
It is. It
All
is,
right.
man.
Well, then, in that case, where would you like to send folks to find and follow you online, to find the show, and to pick up copies of the books?
So, I'm on pretty much every social media. My main obviously being YouTube. It's just youtube.com/ the @ symbol mystery archives. If you want to pick up a book, whether volume one or volume two, you can do so at Amazon. It's available at Barnes and Noble, pretty much a bunch of different online bookstores. But if you would like a signed copy from me, actually, I can pull up the link here. Sorry, it's relatively new. But if you
Do
want to
they
visit,
do they go
I'm sorry,
beyond
good.
beyond the fray? Do they go through Beyond the Fray?
So they can also go through Beyond the Fray, but they can visit, I run my own store as well for, like, my
Oh,
merchandise.
okay.
So they can visit mysteryarchives.myshopify.com, and I offer signed copies. I ship them out myself. All the merchandise and stuff I do myself as well.
Right on. Right on.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. Well, you
it
heard him,
helps.
folks. Yeah. Oh, well, I'll have to get a signed copy from you for volume 2 because I am gonna snag that for myself.
For
All
sure, dude.
right. Well, let's close it out. Help me round it all out here. Would you like to leave my audience with any final thoughts, words of wisdom, or a piece of advice?
Ooh, again, fantastic question. Um I guess like maybe some parting words would be just I appreciate you guys if you took the time not only to listen to this episode, but if you do happen to buy and read my book, or if you visit my channel and check out some of my content, just know that a lot of work has gone into it, and I do my absolute best to get the stories out there. And yeah, The best advice I could give is just follow your dreams and your passions, and you never know, you might get lucky and put in enough work where you might be able to do it one day for a living.
Tale weaver, nightmare creator, host of Mystery Archives, Kody Richardson. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. What an intense series of titles. I appreciate that. Again, thank you so much.
Find Mystery Archives over on YouTube and follow the links in the notes to pick up your copy of Stories from the Archives. Listen, read, thank me later. Kody was kind enough to join me backstage for a quick chat for my patrons. If you would like to catch this backstage banter and other private guest chats and patron exclusives, head over to patreon.com/ParanormGirlPod. This is a wonderful way to support the program and my ongoing efforts to cover topics more extensively and bring on even more incredible guests, just like Kody Richardson. 3 other very easy ways that you can show support are by following PGP on social media and YouTube at Paranorm Girl Pod, sharing the show with others every chance you get, and by submitting your personal eerie tales and encounters with the paranormal to be featured at the top of an upcoming episode, or the next edition of Spectral Shorts. Call the show's spooky story recording line at 208-717-1655. Leave your identifier, the location where the encounter took place, and then tell your story. I also invite you, of course, if it is your preference, to email your story to the show and I will tell it for you. Message me at paranormgirlpod@gmail.com. This has been your mid-season finale. Thank you all so much for tuning in. The show will be going dark for a couple of weeks so that I can enjoy the holidays with family and get ready for the second half of the season. But I will be back middle of January. That is a wrap for now. Happy Christmas Eve, everyone. I will see you all in the new year. Stay safe, keep the nightlight on, and sleep with one eye open.